Hello, I hope everyone is doing well. This week we're going to be talking about a different organization, one which is quite controversial. It's also very misunderstood. You'll see in the picture here a poster for a mock a movie called Battle in Seattle. It was actually a reflection of what happened in Seattle in 1999 when the World Trade Organization went there for its biannual meeting and a riot broke out. And that was the first time that many people in the world, excuse me, many people in the world even heard of the World Trade Organization, and it's still very unclear what this organization is all about. Nevertheless, it is one of the original Bretton Woods organizations that emerged after World War II and has continued to have an impact on the global economy and on global development. So, I'll give you a very short history. The organization was originally known as the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, and that was basically an organization of 23 countries which signed a treaty in 1947. Then, over the course of the next 3 or 4 decades, the organization expanded. It started to include other organizations, and it met on a fairly regular basis to do its work, which I will talk about in a moment. The basic idea was that as the world economy was growing out of World War II, there was a need to both institute a global trading regime and also mechanisms for controlling any kind of disputes and for setting up rules and regulations with regard to how that trade would be carried out. In the end of the 20th century, the general agreement basically outlived its usefulness, largely because there was a growing demand on the part of developing countries, and also the countries that emerged from the breakup of the Soviet Union, to create a more inclusive and more open world trading system, and therefore the World Trade Organization was created. Now, since its founding, the World Trade Organization has been meeting regularly in what they call rounds, and the rounds are normally named after particular cities where these take place. So we had Singapore in 1996, Geneva, the famous Seattle uh, meetings, which turned into really a kind of catastrophe for the World Trade Organization. But in a way, it was also kind of wake up call that that people were paying attention to the global trading regime, and that the organization had to respond. And in any case, the organization kept meeting, kept refining its agenda. So, what are the main pillars of the World Trade Organization? What is the work of the organization? Well, basically, it breaks down into four pillars. The first is trade negotiations, which is establishing those rules of the road or rules and regulations that govern the international trading system. The dispute settlement mechanism, which prevents conflicts from escalating to certainly to violence, but also or to breaking off of diplomatic relations. So it's basically a trade. It's a sort of trade court where trading disputes can be settled. Then lastly, I'll say thirdly, the trade capacity building. I mean, this was again something which emerged later in the life of the WTO, as they recognized that many developing countries simply didn't have the internal capacity to develop products for trading, and also didn't have the knowledge to put their products on the international market and to navigate through all of the regulations. Now, it's necessary to understand that even though the World Trade Organization has many rules and regulations, each country has its own rules and regulations, and that probably is the main source of the lack of progress that the World Trade Organization has had in really building an international trade regime. And then lastly, the organization is responsible for implementing and monitoring various types of trade organizations. So now, when the World Trade Organization, unlike the IMF and the World Bank, has had a very sort of large turnover of director generals, and part of that is sort of frustration with the job, although obviously it's a very good job in the international system, but it's also an opportunity to give countries other than Europe or countries from Europe or from the United States the opportunity to head a major multilateral organization. The current head of the World Trade Organization is Roberto Azevedo from Brazil, and he's a very interesting individual. He's very outspoken, and when he came in, when he began his work at the WTO, he said that of those four pillars that I just mentioned, the one that's really not working very well, and the one that is in fact the most important, the one in establishing the trade negotiation framework, has really not been working. And he said recently, as recently as this month, at a meeting at a high-level meeting with Canadian parliamentarians, he said the same cannot be said about the WTO's capacity to negotiate new trade rules. The WTO has failed to deliver new multilateral results since its creation. It is sobering to reflect that our current trade rules were agreed 20 years ago and that they are therefore yet to enter the 21st century. So for some reason that even the head of the World Trade Organization has difficulty understanding the global powers that control or that have controlled the global trading regime have been very slow to change, have been very slow to become more inclusive, have been very slow to take account of the needs and desires of developing countries. So what are the main points of contention? Well, a very significant one is subsidies, the fact that for various reasons, some monetary, some social, countries subsidize various crops or various industries in order to sort of create food security in the case of Indian agriculture, or to protect industries that are growing but would not do very well without some sort of government protection. But this is a no-no in the international system, and the WTO has really tried to put a stop to that. Obviously, tariffs, the charges that countries set up in order for exporters to move their goods into their countries, these things can be very detrimental or disincentives to trade, and the WTO tries to get them reduced. Other criticisms are that the rich countries have made the rules, and the rich countries control the WTO. Then also a very sort of paradoxical situation where there's a lack of environmental and labor right protection in trade deals. But from the point of view of developing countries, these rights-based arguments are viewed as protectionist. They're viewed as attempts by rich countries to impose standards on poor countries with regard to their environmental behavior or regard to their labor rights regime, which would make them less competitive. It's clear that in many poor countries, what they have to offer is cheap labor, and therefore, if you institute a labor rights regime where you have minimum wages and you have to make a lot more investments in workers' sort of workers' welfare, then you're going to lose that competitive edge. So that's a very sort of strange, paradoxical conflict that goes on between rich countries and the WTO and poor countries. Also, it's felt that the WTO is under the influence of big multinational, hence non-democratic, non-elected corporations that make the rules, and that the WTO often tries to override the national strategies and other international agreements and treaties on the environment, health and safety, and human rights, so that even countries can set up their own frameworks and perhaps regional frameworks that the WTO will attempt to override. And lastly, the rules on protection of intellectual property, things like software and pharmaceuticals, the way that the WTA rules and regulations are written, they serve to protect the financial interests of the countries that produce these things, whereas they could be produced much more cheaply and for the benefit of people in poor country, but they're simply not allowed to because of international trade rules. So, as a result of all this contention, the WTO has been a focal point of major globalization demonstrations, despite the fact that it's been relatively ineffective in implementing, even its own aspirations with regard to setting up a global trading regime. But nevertheless, it has become a target for anti-globalization activists, for pro-environmental activists, for human rights activists, for labor rights activists. But a lot of the protest is perhaps really not totally aware of what the WTO is really about and what the WTO can really accomplish. So, in the end, though, we can say that trade is a very important factor for development. If you work in developing countries, you understand that it's very important for these countries to be able to export, and that promotion of exports, the kind of promotion activities that the WTO engages in, can actually help promote export production. Certainly for agricultural products, for small-scale manufacturing, and also for eventually for services. It helps to diversify the economies. It builds local capacities and local skills for doing various types of trade and manufacturing and agribusiness. It's certainly a source of foreign exchange revenues, which countries can use to import food if they have to, but also to import IT equipment, to import machinery, to import a whole range of things which aren't produced in the countries, but which can be purchased on the international market with international exchange dollars. And lastly, trade throughout history has opened up exchanges on many fronts between countries and cultures. It's sort of the Marco Polo phenomenon, where Marco Polo went to China and basically revealed to Europe, a world which very few people had any sense existed, and that the WTO has been a source of contention. It's been a source of even violence in the world, and it's unclear whether the WTO, as it's currently constituted, is the best vehicle for accomplishing its goals.